Well, I think one of the most important things that companies should first be thinking about is what is their real primary needs. So look to address the things that are business problems that you have today, rather than just look at everything that's very interesting, very cool technology, and try to address those real pain points that you have, and then look to see who's in the space addressing those things. And it's still very challenging, though. It's still very challenging because you don't know which companies are the ones that are going to be able to progress. So you kind of need to work with a few of them until you find one's comfortable. I almost, in some cases, say it's similar to when you go to find a doctor. You know, most doctors can solve your problems, but which doctor are you going to be most comfortable with? So that's the one that you want to use. It's the same case here. You got to find a number of fintech companies and then see which one most is aligned with the business problem you need to solve. I would say right now we're actually seeing something different from the banks, where they're not only actively investing in fintechs and actively setting up, and this is kind of a first, the sandbox or the incubator approaches, where they're really involved with the companies in helping them grow and helping them with a number of areas in the past that banks really didn't get involved in. So I think that banks have kind of turned a corner in terms of how they look at new technology, how they look at the companies that provide the new technology, and how they really partner and support them. But there's still that old kind of thinking from the banks that we're still going to continue to see, and it's best summed up by they want the latest and greatest second. So the translation of finding good proof of concepts, solving good business problems, and turning that into pilots that become successful will have some delay before you actually will see those with commercial usage. And the commercial usage is going to be driven by the bank's best customers, their corporates. I think that you might find some of the bigger banks that will talk to the course, but maybe not be part of it, almost from a marketing standpoint. But really, the ones that are going to have the hardest problem are the banks a little more downstream. You know, the regional banks, the tier 2s, the tier 3s, where they just don't have the money and the budget and the resources to actually be able to go into those things. Those banks are really in danger of falling behind, where the bigger banks, because of their strength, can implement some things that are going to be costly and difficult for them. And again, I think the solution there is partnerships with the fintech companies as well as partnerships with the banks altogether. The corporates are first have to understand that they have a lot more power in the banks than they realize. That the banks are going to work to what their corporates want. So if the corporates come to the banks and say, we want these kind of solutions, these are the problems we have, this is what we need done, the banks are going to react to that because that's who they have to serve. And it's interesting, even if you just look in the supply chain finance space, for instance, right? So there, while the banks understand the business, clearly, we have seen slower adoption, I think, than is expected based on what the benefits that we've seen that those programs can deliver. And a lot of that is because the corporates haven't come to the banks to say, you know, yes, we want this, yes, we need this. And in a lot of cases, you know, the banks will do this for those corporates that say, but don't necessarily roll it out to all their corporates. You know, they kind of sit back and wait for corporates to come and say, yeah, we're ready for this kind of program. So there's been going on, I think, some education process, but corporates, I think, need to understand that the pain points that you feel with your banks sometimes are ones that if you talk to your banks directly, they will be able to address it, especially if they see that it's going to improve the business relationship between you and your bank.